So today we're taking a deep dive into grief. And not just, grief in general. We're looking at C.S. Lewis as he's processing the loss of his wife.
Yeah.
In a grief observed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's so interesting about this is, we know C.S. Lewis
Right.
from Narnia.
Of course, yeah.
From his theological works. But A Grief Observed is a very different kind of book.
Very different.
It's his own personal, raw journal entries that he never intended to publish.
Right.
Where he's really wrestling with this loss and trying to make sense of it. And we have not only his words, but we're also bringing in the perspective of Madeline L'Engle.
Oh, wow.
Who wrote the foreword to this book.
Yeah.
As a widow herself.
Yeah.
And also his stepson, Douglas.
Okay.
Who gives a really intimate family view.
That's great.
In his introduction.
Wonderful.
So we kind of get this 360-degree view.
Yeah, that's great.
Of his grief. So let's just jump right in. Chapter 1.
Okay.
Lewis just kind of throws us into his experience.
Yeah.
It's not that poetic, romantic sadness that we see, in movies or anything like that.
Exactly. And I think what's so striking is how Lewis, right from the beginning, he dispels all those kind of romanticized notions we have about grief. Mm-hmm. He describes it, he uses words like feeling like he's been hit by a wave, or that he's been in this perpetual state of fear and disorientation, even compares it to being drunk or concussed, or you're aware.
Oh, interesting.
But you're not all there.
Wow.
Your mind understands something's happened, but your body, your emotions, they just haven't quite caught up.
It's like that feeling of being underwater.
Yes.
Where everything is muffled and distorted, and you're just trying to find your way back to the surface.
Yeah.
And Lewis describes this invisible blanket that separates him from the world.
It's like he's become a ghost.
Yes.
In his own life. Yeah.
It's like he's haunting himself.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because this is C.S. Lewis.
I know, right.
This is a man known for his intellect.
Absolutely, yeah.
His faith.
Right.
And yet, this experience brings him to his knees.
It's a very human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really underscores the universality of grief. Doesn't matter who you are, what you believe.
It touches all of us.
It touches all of us in this very primal way.
And he uses such vivid language when he's describing it.
He does.
He talks about these jabs of red-hot memory that catch him off guard.
It's interesting, too, because he finds this pleasure in sadness.
Yeah. This guilty pleasure.
This guilty pleasure, like he shouldn't be enjoying this.
Yes. And he wants to be alone.
Right.
But he also doesn't want to be alone.
Yeah. That push and pull.
Yes, that push and pull.
Have you ever felt that?
Absolutely.
Where you want to withdraw.
Yes.
But you also crave that connection.
Absolutely.
At the same time, it's such a testament to just the complexity of grief.
Yeah.
How it touches every aspect of our being.
Yeah.
Even when we're processing something so deeply personal.
And then it gets even more intense because Lewis, this man of faith, starts talking about this feeling of God's absence. And he's brutally honest about it.
He is.
He describes it as feeling like he's met with a door slammed in his face when he turns to God.
And that is jarring, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially coming from someone who's dedicated his life to exploring faith.
Exactly.
He doesn't shy away from the doubt, the anger.
And I feel like he's more afraid that his faith is going to become a platitude because of this experience than he is of losing faith.
That's exactly right.
Right. Like, that's the thing that he's struggling with, is that, he doesn't want this to just become meaningless.
Exactly.
Because of what he's going through.
Because that then calls into question everything, doesn't it?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And he even says, why is he so present a commander in our time of prosperity? And so very absent a help in time of trouble.
That's a question for the ages, isn't it?
I know. I mean, where do we even begin to unpack that?
And you know what I love about Lewis is that he doesn't try to offer these easy answers.
Right.
He doesn't try to explain away the pain or diminish how raw this experience is. He allows himself.
Yeah.
And in a sense, he allows us as readers to sit with that discomfort.
Yes.
With the seeming contradiction.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
I know.
Lewis's exploration of grief.
Yeah. It takes us down some very unexpected paths.
I know.
doesn't it?
And it challenges not just his faith, but his understanding of love,
right,
memory, and what it means to live in the face of loss.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are just scratching the surface here because as Lewis moves through his grief,
Right.
he starts to dissect it. He starts to question it. And in chapter 2, he catches himself being, well, a bit self-centered in his grief.
It's like he's realizing that his world has shrunk.
Yeah.
And he's hurting. And he even talks about, he feels resentful that her life was snatched away.
Right.
Just as she was finding, this new rhythm.
Right.
Of happiness.
Right.
And it's almost like he wants to hold on to her memory in a way that serves him.
Yes.
More than it honors who she was.
Yes. And he talks about that. He talks about this fear of his memory of joy becoming a puppet.
Yes.
A hollow representation that he controls.
Yes.
And I think that resonates.
Oh, absolutely.
With anyone who's experienced loss.
Yes.
Have you ever felt that? Like you're clinging to an image.
All the time.
Or a story.
Yes.
But it doesn't quite capture the essence of the person you've lost.
It's like trying to hold on to a handful of sand.
Exactly.
The tighter you grip,
the
more slips through your fingers.
Right.
And he talks about that he craves that cleansing tang of her otherness.
Yeah.
That resistance, that spark that made their relationship so real, so dynamic.
And he beautifully describes that fear of losing those sharp edges.
Yes.
He doesn't want to embalm her.
Right.
As the Egyptians did,
right.
Preserving only a shell.
Right.
He wants to remember her fully.
Yes.
Flaws and all.
And then he has it's most humorous, he has this anecdote about encountering this man.
Yes.
Who's tending to his mother's grave.
Right.
And refers to it as, visiting mom.
Yeah.
And at first, Lewis is kind of like put off by it, like the sentimentality of it.
Right.
But then it sparks this whole other reflection on, the different ways that we connect with the dead.
Right. And I think that speaks to, the learner in all of us. We like to get those fresh perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's like that man's simple act of caring for a physical space.
Right.
Helps Lewis to consider these different avenues for honoring memory.
Right.
It's not about freezing someone in time.
Right.
It's about finding ways to integrate their memory.
Yes.
Into the ever-changing landscape of our lives.
And then, of course, Lewis, being Lewis, dives right back into these deeper questions.
Sure, yeah.
The existential questions. And he talks about, he used to pray for other people who had died with this sense of certainty about their continued existence.
Right.
But when it comes to joy, he hits a wall.
Yes.
It's like that's where his faith is really put to the test.
It truly is. And he even describes this ghastly sense of unreality.
Yeah.
When he tries to imagine her with God.
Yes.
It's as if the comfort that he once found in his beliefs has just dissolved.
Yeah.
And it's just this raw, gaping wound.
Yes. And he questions that classic consolation, right?
Right.
She's with God now. He's like, but what does that even mean? And he really, he asks those tough questions.
She does.
If she's with God, then why did he allow her to suffer?
Right.
How can we reconcile a loving God with the pain that we see in the world, the pain that we experience personally? And it's almost like wrestling with those questions leads him down this even darker path in chapter 3, where he starts talking about grief being like what does he say, a bomber circling around and dropping its bombs.
Each time the circle brings it over.
Yes. Yeah. And it's such a visceral image.
Like
it really captures that cyclical nature of grief. The way that it can just ambush you when you least expect it.
And it's interesting. He contrasts that with physical pain,
right?
Which he describes as this, steady barrage, intense, unrelenting, but at least it's constant.
Right.
Grief has this way of tricking you
right
into thinking you're getting a break from it.
Yes.
Only to have it return.
Yes.
With even greater force.
And he goes through this period of questioning everything.
He does.
He thought he believed about suffering, about God's goodness. He even brings up that age-old question,
Right.
If God is all-knowing and all-powerful and all-loving, why is there so much pain in the world?
And keep in mind, this is C.S. Lewis.
I know.
The scholar.
Right.
The theologian who's built a career on this.
Exactly. And yet he admits, he didn't truly grapple with this question until he was faced with such a profound personal loss.
Wow. It's like you have to be completely blindsided by life to really test your beliefs, to see if they hold up under the weight of real suffering or if they just crumble into dust.
Yeah.
And for a while, he seems to find this strange solace in this idea of a cosmic sadist.
Yeah.
You know, this God who inflicts pain for reasons that we can't possibly comprehend.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty bleak outlook.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the intensity
of
his struggle, the way grief can push us to the edge of what we thought we knew.
Yeah.
But Lewis, being Lewis, doesn't stay in that darkness forever.
He challenges himself to find a way through, even if it means questioning everything.
And that's where things start to shift, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily find, like,
answers,
but he starts to see this path forward. In chapter 4, he talks about grief being like this...
The long valley, a winding valley where any bend may reveal a totally new landscape.
It's not about reaching some final destination of closure.
Right.
It's about, navigating the twists and turns.
Yeah. It's about learning to live with the loss.
Yes.
To integrate it into the fabric of your life.
Right.
He even compares it at one point to losing a leg. The initial wound might heal, but you're forever changed by that experience.
And that's such a powerful analogy.
It is, isn't it?
Because it acknowledges the permanence of the loss, but it also suggests that there's this possibility of adaptation, of finding new ways to move through the world.
And that's what he's wrestling with. He's wrestling with this fear that his love for joy will just become a faded memory.
Yeah.
This charming episode in his past.
Right.
And he doesn't want to kill the dead a second time by trying to, smooth over the edges of his grief or pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
He wants to stay connected.
Right.
But he's just not sure how.
Right. And he makes this, I think, really profound observation that by clinging too tightly to his sorrow, he's actually creating distance between himself and joy.
He's pushing her away.
Yes.
And he's pushing away the possibility of feeling her presence.
And he says that it's in those unexpected moments of joy, of laughter, of finding beauty in the world that he feels her presence most strongly.
It's like he realizes that by allowing himself to experience life fully, even in her absence, he's honoring their love in a way that transcends death.
Which is such a counterintuitive idea.
It is.
Because you think, to honor somebody we've lost means to hold on to that sadness, the pain.
Right.
But he's suggesting that maybe it's the opposite.
Maybe it's about allowing ourselves to experience joy again.
Yes.
To laugh again, to find meaning and purpose even as we grieve.
Have you ever experienced that where a moment of unexpected joy felt like a connection?
I think a lot of us have.
Yeah.
And Lewis even connects that back to these ancient myths where the dead are actually imploring the living. Stop mourning me.
Wow.
Let go of your sorrow. Embrace life.
Wow.
And it's as if he's saying our grief, while understandable, can become a barrier between us and those we've lost.
And this whole experience becomes a spiritual lesson for him as well.
Of course, yeah.
It's a way of understanding his own faith.
On a deeper level.
On a deeper level.
Yeah, right.
He realizes that his beliefs, like his love for joy, were partly a house of cards that he thought were strong until they were tested.
By real suffering.
By this, yes.
And in the breaking, there's also the possibility of rebuilding.
Yes.
Of finding a more solid foundation.
And that brings us to those final lines of the book, which are, I think, both hopeful, but also so beautifully ambiguous.
They are.
He talks about this feeling that there never was any problem.
Right.
This shattering and disarming simplicity.
Right.
That he can only describe as a chuckle in the darkness.
It's such a Louisian ending, though.
I know.
Because it's like he leaves us with more questions.
Well, I know.
And answers.
Yes. And what do you make of that?
It's this reminder that even in the face of profound loss, mystery remains.
Yeah.
And maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in those unanswered questions.
Yeah.
In that space between what we know and what we can't comprehend.
Yes.
That faith, like love, finds its truest expression.
That is so beautiful.
That's a beautiful thought.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
From the depths of despair to those glimmers of hope, those chuckles in the darkness. And I think that's the beauty of A Grief Observed.
Yeah.
Lewis doesn't offer any easy answers or platitudes. He just invites us to sit with him.
In the raw, messy reality.
Yes. In his pain.
Doubt.
His struggle.
His struggle to make sense of loss.
And in doing so, reminds us that we're not alone.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
So if this deep dive resonated with you at all, I highly recommend checking out A Grief Observed. It's a short read, but it will stay with you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.